Rack Thomas is dead. Not killed by an enemy, not killed by the feds, but killed by the one person who owed her nothing and loved her the most. In Raising Kanan Season 5, Episode 8, the series finale, everything the family fought 5 seasons to protect fell apart in less than an hour, and I still can't decide who I'm angrier at. Let's get one thing straight before we go any further. This finale, titled Unconditional Love, was never actually about who wins the war between Rack and her enemies. That's the trap a lot of people walked into after Episode 7, myself included. We spent an entire week convinced this was building toward some massive shootout, some final act of vengeance where bodies would drop left and right and Kanan would emerge as the last man standing in Queens. That's not what we got. What we got instead was quieter, sadder, and honestly a lot more devastating, because it wasn't about violence winning. It was about watching two people who loved each other run out of time to fix what they'd already broken. Here's where the episode actually starts, and it's not with guns. It starts with Rack cornered in a way we've genuinely never seen her before. After everyone in her circle turned their backs on her, after Flossie and Pino walked away, after burying Marvin, Rack is out of allies and out of moves. And in a moment that honestly shocked me, she starts seriously considering flipping for the feds. Think about that for a second. This is a woman who has spent 5 seasons treating the idea of snitching like the ultimate betrayal, the one line nobody in her family is allowed to cross, and now she's the one sitting across from federal agents weighing whether to become exactly the thing she spent her whole life despising. That's not weakness. That's what it looks like when someone has truly run out of road. And this is where Kanan does something that caught almost everyone off guard. He doesn't want her to do it. Not because he's suddenly become sentimental, but because the idea of his mother becoming an informant, disappearing into witness protection, effectively vanishing from his life forever, cracks something open in him that we haven't seen all season. Remember, this is a kid who, just 1 episode earlier, executed his own uncle without blinking. This is a kid the show has spent an entire season stripping down to nothing but ambition and cold calculation. And suddenly he's the one begging his mother not to leave. It's almost funny in a dark way. Kanan spent the whole series resisting Rack's control, and the moment she's about to slip away from him for real, he panics. That reaction is what pushes Rack to remember exactly who she is. Watching her son fight to keep her in his life reminds her that she built an empire out of refusing to run, and it snaps her back into the version of herself we recognize. So instead of taking the deal, she goes back to the streets to fight for her life the only way she knows how. Now here's where the episode gets messy, and honestly a little strange if you think too hard about it. Much of Rack's path back to power runs through Stefano, the very man who spent this stretch of the season trying to destroy her. The show leans hard into this idea that Stefano has always harbored feelings for Rack, feelings she never returned, and that his obsession with taking her down is tangled up with rejection as much as business. It's a choice. Not every viewer is going to buy it, especially after seasons of watching their relationship read as pure rivalry with zero romantic undertone. But it's the thread the finale pulls, right down to Pino offering to spare Rack's life in exchange for something deeply uncomfortable, just to spite Stefano. What actually shifts the balance of power isn't Rack maneuvering Stefano and Pino against each other. It's Kanan. In one of the rawest scenes the show has ever given us, Kanan sits down with Stefano, and for the first time in what feels like forever, he drops the armor completely. He admits out loud that the thought of losing his mother terrifies him. Not in a manipulative way, not as a play to protect his own interests. As a son. If you've been watching the show since Season 1, watching a kid with a photographic memory and a bright future get slowly ground down into someone capable of murdering family without hesitation, this scene lands like a gut punch. Because underneath every layer of ruthlessness the show spent 5 years building, there's still a teenager who isn't ready to bury his mother. And Stefano, of all people, responds to that honesty with something close to compassion. It's jarring. It almost feels like it shouldn't work. But it does, largely because of how unguarded Kanan is in that moment, a version of him we may never see again after this. That conversation is what leads directly into the scene everyone's going to be talking about, the one that plays out on a quiet street between Kanan and Rack, stripped of tactics, stripped of business, just a mother and son finally being honest with each other after years of lies. And it's what happens right after that conversation, while the two of them are still standing there vulnerable and exposed, that changes everything. While Kanan and Rack were having the most honest conversation of their entire relationship, someone else was watching. Jukebox. By this point in the episode, Jukebox already knows the truth. Flossie, who was closer to Marvin than almost anyone left standing, finally told her what actually happened at that church. Kanan didn't just fail to save Marvin. Kanan killed him. And Jukebox, who has spent this entire season slowly losing every person she's ever loved, now knows the one person she trusted enough to keep close is the one responsible for the biggest loss of her life. Her first instinct is exactly what you'd expect. Kill Kanan. An eye for an eye, uncle for uncle, and honestly, after everything Kanan's done this season, it's hard to argue she's wrong to want it. But then she finds him. And instead of finding Kanan alone, vulnerable, an easy target for payback, she finds him wrapped up in a genuine, tearful embrace with his mother. The two people responsible for basically every hard thing that's ever happened to her, sharing a moment of real, unguarded love. And something in Jukebox breaks differently than we expected. She doesn't go after Kanan. She goes after Rack. I want to sit with that decision for a second because it's genuinely one of the more uncomfortable choices this finale makes, and I think it's supposed to be uncomfortable. Rack never did anything to Jukebox directly. Rack isn't the one who pulled the trigger on Marvin. But Jukebox, in this moment, isn't operating on logic anymore. She's operating on pure devastation, and she decides the cruelest thing she can possibly do to Kanan isn't to kill him. It's to take away the one person he just admitted, out loud, for the first time all season, that he actually needs. She wants him to feel what she feels. Empty. Alone. Robbed of the one relationship that was supposed to be unbreakable. So she kills Rack. Right there, right after that Tender Street scene, right when it seemed like Rack might actually walk away from this war alive. It's worth pausing on how quiet this death is compared to everything else the show has done. No big speech, no drawn-out standoff, no dramatic build-up with Rack getting one last defiant line. One of the most powerful, calculating, dangerous women in the entire Power universe, a woman who outthought federal agents, rival dealers, and her own family for 5 straight seasons, goes out in a moment of pure, senseless retaliation that has almost nothing to do with her. That's the gut punch. Rack spent this whole series being underestimated by men who thought they were smarter than her, and in the end, the person who takes her down isn't a rival kingpin or a jealous partner. It's a grieving young woman acting out of raw, unfiltered pain. And here's the detail that really stings once you sit with it. Jukebox lies to Kanan about what happened. She tells him Rack's final words were something soft, something comforting, something that lets Kanan believe his mother went out at peace. It's a small lie, but it tells you everything about where Jukebox's head is by the end of this episode. She's not just capable of killing Rack. She's capable of controlling the story Kanan gets to carry with him for the rest of his life, shaping his grief the same way grief has shaped hers. Think about what that means for the future of this character. We already know from Power that adult Jukebox and adult Kanan have a complicated, tense, but oddly enduring relationship. For years, fans have wondered how that friendship survives if Jukebox knows what Kanan did to Marvin. Now we know the uncomfortable answer. It survives because they're even. In their own twisted, broken logic, Kanan took someone irreplaceable from Jukebox, and Jukebox took someone irreplaceable from Kanan, and somehow that horrifying trade becomes the foundation the rest of their relationship gets built on. Neither one ever moves against the other again, not because they've forgiven each other, but because deep down they both understand that killing the other would just be doing them a favor, ending a pain neither of them can escape any other way. It's a bleak way to explain a relationship we've watched play out for years in Power, but it fits. This entire series has been building toward showing us that Kanan wasn't born a villain. He was built into one, piece by piece, loss by loss, betrayal by betrayal. And this is the loss that finishes the job. With Rack gone, the balance of power in Queens shifts completely, and what's left behind isn't a triumphant Kanan standing over a defeated empire. It's a teenager who just lost his mother, who just found out the truth was gentler than the lie he was told, and who now has to figure out what kind of man he's going to become without her voice in his ear anymore. Whatever answer this show has been building toward for 5 seasons, we already know from Power exactly where that road ends. What we didn't know, until this finale, was how much it was going to cost to get him there. There's one more piece of this finale that changes how you look at everything that came before it, and it happens after the credits start rolling. A short scene, easy to miss if you don't stick around, shows 2 young boys getting pulled into the world Kanan already knows too well. One of them is Tommy. The other is Ghost. Kids, not yet the men Power spent years building into legends, already circling the same streets, already being shaped by the same city that built Kanan into what he became. It's not a long scene. It doesn't need to be. It's just enough to remind you that this story never actually ends. It just keeps handing the weight down to whoever's standing closest. And that, more than any death, any betrayal, any final showdown, might be the real point of this entire series. Raising Kanan was never really asking whether Kanan would become dangerous. We already knew the answer to that going in, because Power told us years ago exactly who he grows up to be. What this show was actually asking is how. What does it take to turn a smart kid with a good memory and a future ahead of him into someone capable of killing his own family without flinching? And the answer this finale gives you isn't one big villain origin moment. It's a slow accumulation of small ones. A mother who taught him love and violence were the same language. Uncles who underestimated him until it was too late. A best friend who loved him enough to lie to him rather than let him drown in the truth. By the time Rack dies in his arms, Kanan isn't becoming a monster. He already is one. This episode just finally let us watch him feel something about it. What's strange, and honestly kind of haunting, is how much restraint the finale shows with Breeze. After everything he's absorbed this season, all of Snaps and Pop's territory, all of that power now sitting in his hands, you'd expect the finale to hand him a massive final moment. It doesn't. He's mostly kept on the sidelines here, which at first plays like a letdown if you're watching for closure. But it starts to make a lot more sense once you remember this isn't really an ending. It's a handoff. Breeze's story clearly isn't finished, it's just being paused here so it can pick back up somewhere else, in whatever comes next for this universe. And that's really what this finale ends up being about once you strip away the plot mechanics. Family, in this show, was never the safety net it's supposed to be. It was the thing that broke people down instead of holding them together. Rack protected Kanan for years, sometimes at enormous cost to herself, and the one time Kanan tried to protect her back, it wasn't enough to save her, because the damage from everything before that moment had already been done. Jukebox loved Marvin the way most of us hope somebody loves us at least once in our lives, and when that love was taken from her, what she did with the grief wasn't healing. It was destruction, aimed at the people closest to the person who hurt her. Nobody in this finale gets a clean ending. Nobody gets the thing they actually wanted. What they get instead is the truth about who they really are once everything else is stripped away, and for a show that's always been about the making of a killer, that might be the most honest ending it could have given us. So where does that leave us? Kanan walks away from this finale without the one person who shaped every decision he's ever made, carrying a lie about her last words that he'll probably never learn the truth about. Jukebox walks away carrying a secret that will define her entire relationship with him for years to come, one neither of them will ever speak out loud, but both of them will always know is there. And somewhere out there, two kids who don't even know Kanan's name yet are about to have their lives collide with his, starting a cycle this show has spent 5 seasons proving nobody in this world ever really escapes. That's the story Raising Kanan chose to tell in the end. Not a war with a winner. Not a villain triumphing over his enemies. Just a boy who lost the last person tying him to who he used to be, and a franchise quietly setting the stage for the next generation to make the exact same mistakes. If this breakdown helped you make sense of everything that went down in the finale, do me a favor and hit that like button. It genuinely helps this channel more than you'd think. And if you haven't already, subscribe so you don't miss what we cover next, because there's a lot more of this universe still to unpack. Let me know down in the comments what you thought of how Rack's story ended, and whether you buy the way Jukebox and Kanan's relationship gets explained. I'll see you in the next one.